not be discussing creepypastas in the internet section, as the video would be far too long if I did. So please, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see me discuss creepypastas in the future. It is now the future. I will now be talking about creepypastas. Do creepypastas need an introduction? If you've been on the internet for any period of time, you should have at least a vague idea of what they are. Now, as is the case for many people my age, I was exposed to creepypastas right when they were getting popular, even though I was definitely too young. These stories were so scary to me that they legitimately sometimes give me nightmares. Because I was 8. I was a little itty-bitty baby man. Now, creepypastas predate the early 2010s, of course, but the majority of creepypastas that people actually care about are from this era. The late 2000s and early 2010s is when we got the classics. That's when we got the real good shit. Instead of this newfangled ARG, analog horror, backrooms, catalog, scrimblow files stuff that we get now. So, I've selected 13 classic creepypastas that I consider to be the absolute best. And by absolute best, I mean they fucking suck. With each story, I will be summarizing it, and talking about my experience with it, and then I'll discuss if I think it's aged well or if it's any good. Because that's the question I want to answer here today. Have old creepypastas aged well? Probably not. While I have grouped these stories together in ways that you'll see in a moment, I will also be listing them individually in the chapters below. But without further ado, these are terrible creepypastas that scared a generation.
My name's Jeff.
When you hear the word creepypasta, what story first comes to mind? For me, the story that first comes to mind is Jeff the Killer, which is arguably the most famous creepypasta, up there with the likes of Slender Man and... yeah, that's kinda it, actually. Now, while Jeff the Killer was very scary to me as a kid, mostly because of the image, which admittedly is still a bit creepy, but that's something I'll dive into later. For now, I'll be discussing the story itself, which, let me just tell you now, it has not aged well. The story starts with the POV of a young boy's encounter with Jeff. I will give the story one point of praise. This opening with the Jeff encounter is actually decent. It's still not well written, don't get me wrong, but compared to what we're about to get into, it could be so much worse. The story proper begins with Jeff and his family moving into a new neighborhood. Jeff's mom talks with one of the neighbors, and already it's pretty easy to tell that this story is not written very well. There's already some minor grammar mistakes, and the dialogue is just not good, man. But whatever, that's fine. This is a creepypasta. I don't expect this to be Shakespeare or something. Back to the story, Jeff and his brother Lou, which is spelled L-I-U, but I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Lou, are forced to go to a birthday party, which Jeff doesn't want to go to because he just doesn't want to, I guess. Then we got to the next day, and Jeff and Lou get bullied by some other kids who end up pulling knives out for some reason. And Jeff, just through the sheer power of God and anime, beats the kids and also stabs them. The cop ends up talking to them later that day, and for some reason Lou takes the blame for stabbing and beating the kids in order to protect Jeff, even though there was literally zero reason for that to happen. And for some reason the cops and Jeff's parents just believe Lou? 2 days pass and Jeff goes to the party. The bullies are there for some reason, even though all the other kids there are literal infants. And the bullies pull out guns and try to kill Jeff because they lost a fight? Anyway, Jeff kills one of the bullies and wins the fight until he gets covered in bleach and gets lit on fire. Because fucking why not, dude? So Jeff gets lit on fire, turns into the Joker, carves a smile onto his face, and it burns off his eyelids. What? And then he kills his whole family, including Lou, who's out of jail now, by the way, because Randy, the boy that Jeff just killed, confessed to attacking Jeff and Lou. I'm sorry, when did he do that? When did he confess? Was it before or after Jeff punched him so hard his heart stopped? Yes, that is how Jeff killed Randy. What the fuck is this story? Okay, anyway, Jeff kills his whole family, yada yada, and now he kills random people for fun, I guess. If you cannot tell by now, this story is really bad. Now, I had heard many times over the years that Jeff the Killer sucks, but actually reading it now for myself, I don't think I can properly convey just how bad it is. Aside from the slightly interesting intro, the execution of everything in the story is just a power fantasy written by someone probably the same age as Jeff. And as for my experience with the story, it really just boils down to, it scared me back in 2013 when I was like 8 or 9 because I was a dumb child and hadn't actually read the story. It was really just the image that scared me, which is like 1,000 times more interesting than the story will ever be, so I'm gonna talk about that instead. The Jeff the Killer image, or rather the original image used to create it, is currently lost. Now this may come as a surprise to you if you heard the story that the unedited image comes from a photo of a woman who committed suicide because 4chan bullied her, but that story is completely false. You may have also heard that the image was created by the creator of the Jeff the Killer creepypasta, but this is also false since the image predates the creepypasta by at least 3 years. The first known appearance of the image, or a version of it at least, was on a Japanese site called fileman.n1e.jp on July 24, 2005. The image likely predates even this though, and it's likely some form of the image was a meme on the Japanese internet in the early 2000s. Other YouTubers who actually know what they're talking about have done full videos on this subject, so if you'd like to learn more about the origins of the Jeff the Killer image, I recommend watching those. After this video, of course. One last thing before we move on to the next story, I just want to quickly go over all the rip-offs of Jeff the Killer, like Jane the Killer, Nina the Killer, Tiki Toby, TC Toby, I don't remember how that's pronounced. I am not covering this shit, dude. In summary, Jeff the Killer sucks. The image is a little freaky though, but what's far, far more interesting than the bad story, or even worse stories it spawned, is where the image came from. Hopefully, one day the image gets found.
Slender Man.
Hey,
So, if Jeff the Killer isn't the most famous creepypasta, Slender Man probably is. Thankfully, this story is a whole lot shorter, so I can summarize it real quick. Actually, there isn't really even much of a story. The original Slender Man images are just that, images. They're created for a paranormal image contest on the Something Awful forums, with 2 images being created for said contest. A quote was attached to each image, which I'll go ahead and read for you now. Under the first image was the quote, "We didn't want to go. We didn't want to kill them. But its persistent silence and outstretched arms horrified and comforted us at the same time. 1983, photographer unknown, presumed dead." And under the second image was, "One of the 2 recovered photographs from the Sterling City Library blaze, notable for being taken the day in which 14 children vanished, and for what is referred to as the Slender Man. Deformity cited as filmed effects by officials. Fire at library occurred 1 week later. Actual photograph confiscated as evidence. 1986. Photographer Mary Thomas. Missing since June 13th, 1986. I am gonna be fully honest. Slender Man, at least in this form, is still creepy. Like, is it scary? Is it gonna keep me up at night? No. But it's creepy. And that is what a creepypasta should be. It's in the name, after all. But so many creepypastas fail at this one simple thing, as you'll soon see. Can the same be said for the rest of the Slender Man mythos, such as the games, the movie, and the other stuff? Yes and no. The games, at least the major ones like the 8 Pages and The Arrival, no, those games are mid as hell. And the movie is... I mean, I think it's pretty common knowledge at this point that the movie is terrible. But some of the other stuff is on par with the original images, Marble Hornets being a great example, though I don't really have time to delve into Marble Hornets right now, and that's not really what this video is about. So, the verdict on Slender Man is that it still holds up. Good job, Slender Man. Well, Slender Man would still hold up and be regarded as an internet horror classic, except for one thing. I've been avoiding talking about it, and in fact, I wasn't even going to talk about it, but I feel it'd be worse to ignore the events that happened. On May 31st, 2014, in Waukesha, Wisconsin, a horrible crime was done in the name of Slender Man. 2 12-year-old girls lured their friend, Peyton Lutner, to the woods and stabbed her 19 times, with the intent to kill and sacrifice her to Slender Man. Thankfully, Peyton survived as she managed to crawl to a highway and get rescued. Now, it is worth mentioning that one of the 2 perpetrators had a history of mental illness, but mental illness does not excuse trying to murder your friend to appease a fictional character. And as for the other girl, she had no history of mental illness and had no real reason to partake in the stabbing. The 2 girls were institutionalized and sent to prison, respectively. Even though Slender Man may still be considered an internet horror classic, this one act will forever taint its legacy. It is a tragedy that the stabbing occurred, even if nobody lost their life. But just because nobody died, that doesn't make the crime magically better. It's still an attempted murder over a creepypasta. Okay, so I really don't like talking about things like that if it wasn't clear by now. Especially since now I have to go back to talking about bad creepypastas. While I don't know if I'd say the Rake is as well known or popular as Jeff the Killer or Slender Man, I feel like that during the early 2010s at least, it could have been considered one of the big three creepypastas. The story is split into 4 parts, all describing different encounters with the titular Rake. The first 3 parts of the story honestly do not matter at all, and the last part is the only one people actually care about. It recounts how 3 years ago, a family encountered the Rake, and the Rake sat at the foot of the parents' bed, and while the narrator was frozen with fear, the narrator's husband was absolutely yanking out because the Rake got real close to him. Then the Rake leaves and goes into the children's bedroom because of course it does. This is a creepypasta, we gotta get child death in here. Yeah, so the Rake kills one of the kids and the husband also dies by driving into a lake. Now the narrator is paranoid because the Rake is gonna kill them. Yippee! Overall, the story is fine. Similar to Slender Man, I don't really have much of an experience with this story because I don't think I ever actually heard the full thing. The only thing that's really interesting about this story at all is that the image origin is unknown, but unlike Jeff the Killer, nobody cares. You know why nobody cares? Because it's the Rake. The image is just some fake cryptid sighting, and now it's used as a fake cryptid sighting for the spooky 4chan cryptid. I really am struggling to think of things to say because the Rake really is just not interesting at all. The idea of it being more of a cryptid than a creepypasta is cool, I guess, but there's way cooler cryptids out there than just a weird-looking guy. And no, the image isn't from Resistance 3, that's not real.
What the dog doing?
Now that the big 3 creepypastas, in my opinion at least, are out of the way, I want to talk about some creepypastas that are a lot more personal to me. Starting with one of the only creepypastas that still creeps me out a bit, Smile Dog, or Smile.JPEG, whatever you want to call it. The story begins with the narrator talking about his experience with one Mary E., a victim of the Smile Dog. The narrator wants to find out more about Smile Dog, or rather Smile.JPEG, so he can write something about it, I think. I genuinely have no idea why the hell he wants to know about this thing. Like, everyone who has ever seen the image either goes insane or dies, or both. Why the fuck do you want to see the image? Are you stupid? Anyway, the narrator talks to Mary E. again, and she apologizes for acting insane and says that Smile Dog was forcing her to spread the word. Then she kills herself a month later. Some time passes and the narrator receives an email with the fabled Smile.JPEG. Then he reveals that he wrote this article, aka the creepypasta, to spread the word, and he puts the image of that goddamn dog, and now you are cursed! Boo! Yeah, this story is dog ass. This isn't what is creepy to me though. No, it's the image again. Not this one that you're seeing now, this one is fine. This image creeps me out. I genuinely cannot stand looking at this image for more than a few seconds. It's nowhere near as bad as it once was for me, but it still kind of creeps me out. Okay, get that thing out of here. I don't want to look at that anymore. Now, I do actually have more of a history with this creepypasta, since when I first heard of it, and more importantly saw that image, I legitimately had nightmares for a few days. It did not help that I was a child, so I thought that it was really gonna kill me if I didn't spread the word. Eventually, I got over the fear and moved on with my life, but to this day, the red Smile Dog image, as I've seen people call it, does creep me out a little bit. You know the joke people make about creepypastas where it's like, the narrator was a ghost the whole time and now you are a ghost for reading this? Smile Dog unironically does that. There was absolutely no build-up or anything for the narrator revealing that he was cursed the whole time. It just happens. If that wasn't in the story, it'd still be pretty mid, but that one minute detail takes Smile Dog from being mid to still being mid, but worse.
Russian sleep experiment.
When people talk about good or realistic creepypastas, the Russian sleep experiment is one that is frequently brought up. But is it really good or realistic? The story describes an experiment the Russians did during the late 1940s where they kept 5 people awake for as long as possible. After 5 days, the subjects went insane and started screaming, eventually mutilating themselves in addition to killing one of the subjects. Eventually, the scientists and soldiers at the facility went inside the subject's chamber, and a majority got killed by the subjects, even though they shouldn't have even been alive because they ripped out their organs, but whatever. One of the 4 remaining subjects died in the chaos. One had destroyed his vocal cords by screaming, and 2 other subjects, along with the one with no vocal cords, were restrained and given surgery to put their organs back in. Though one of the subjects with vocal cords died during this process. The subject with no vocal cords survived along with the other 2, yes, 2 subjects. Surviving 3 subjects, we'll get to that, don't worry, were placed back in the chamber with one constantly humming and the other 2 flailing, trying to stay awake. One of the subjects then died, and then the remaining one that could speak started screaming, and so 3 scientists were sent to be sealed in by the commander of the experiment. But one of the scientists instead killed the commander and the mute subject, and then asked the remaining subject what he was. The subject then says, "We are you, we are the madness that lurks within you, all blah blah blah, who gives a shit?" And then the subject dies of cringe. I'm sorry, people say this story's good? For a creepypasta, sure, it's good. It's a lot more grounded and realistic for the most part than most creepypastas out there, and aside from one mistake that I'll get into in a second, there aren't that many mistakes in the story, and it's not written that badly. But I'm sorry, I just cannot buy that these people would survive ripping their organs and blood vessels out. But fine, benefit of the doubt, it's a creepypasta, they can do creepy shit, whatever. Where did the mystery 6 subject come from? Because there were 5 subjects, right? 1 died before the scientists went into the chamber, and then 1 was killed in the fight. So 3 of them were restrained and had surgery done on them to try to put their organs back in, but then 1 died during the surgery, leaving only 2 left. So how is there 3 of them back in the chamber at the end? Was there a 6th one that was never brought up? Where the fuck did he come from? Am I insane? Is my reading comprehension terrible? What the fuck happened? Okay, I'm really making this out to be worse than it is. The Russian sleep experiment isn't that bad. It's just kind of mediocre. If you rewrote it a tiny bit and fixed the one big error in there, it'd be perfectly fine. But as it is right now, I don't really understand why people hold it in such high regard, honestly, and that's how I felt for this past decade. Even as a kid, I never really found this one all that scary, and I never really thought it was good. Images aren't even scary, they're all just people in gas masks or a fucking Halloween decoration. I wouldn't even say the Russian sleep experiment has aged badly. The concept is actually pretty good, it's just the execution isn't that great. Okay, I'm getting really tired of talking about mid creepypastas that aren't even bad enough to be entertaining, so before we talk about some complete trash, I want to talk about 2 stories that are actually kind of good. Yes, I know this video is supposed to be about shitty creepypastas, let me have this, okay?
Capital Cove.
Much like the Russian sleep experiment, Cove is brought up frequently when discussing good or realistic creepypastas, except it's actually good. The story is written in the format of a thread on the fictional Net Nostalgia forums discussing a lost children's show that aired in 1971. And while the story isn't really anything that crazy, because of that, it becomes a lot more plausible. The basic gist of the story is that Cove was a really weird show that kids probably shouldn't have watched. It had fucked up looking puppets and a skeleton villain who stole people's skin, and also had an episode that was just screaming. At the end, it's revealed that the show was actually just static on the TV, meaning that only kids could see it somehow. Okay, actually, maybe the story isn't that good, it's kind of stupid. I kid, but yeah, this story is not as good as I remember. It's not bad, not by a long shot, but it's only good by creepypasta standards. Cove is well written, and I would say it's actually aged incredibly well, seeing as analog horror has become more popular as of late, but I don't think it's really all that scary. Even as a kid, I never thought it was scary. Before we move on, I just want to mention one last thing, which is that Cove was written by the same guy behind the Local 58 YouTube channel, that being one Chris Straub. I obviously am not going to get into Local 58 here, but in my opinion, it is a far superior version of the ideas present in Cove, and is highly worth a watch. And I don't even like analog horror that much, so if I'm recommending one, then it's probably good. With that though, it's now time for the gaming creepypastas. So now we're getting into the real good shit, baby!
Mario.
Okay, so originally this segment was going to be about Ben Drowned, but yeah, I'm not fucking reading that right now. So instead, I'm going to be talking about a different gaming creepypasta that's actually decent. Mario. I think I'll be making a separate video for Ben Drowned because not only is the story long, but there's a whole ARG attached to it, so I don't really have time to get into it in this video. Okay, as for Mario, though, this is, in my opinion, one of the better creepypastas for one reason. It's real. I'm not joking, Mario is completely real. That is the original version of it. As with all creepypastas, people took the story and then made their own versions of it. And all the other versions of Mario make it just another generic gaming creepypasta with it being a haunted game and a bunch of deaths attached to it. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the original version of the creepypasta. It is literally just a series of real posts on the Super Mario World Central forums describing the user Adam's experience with a ROM hack of Super Mario World. Now, as for the story itself, if you could call it that, yes, it is full of cliches, but I think that was probably the intention. It's pretty much just Mario is evil and Yoshi hates him with some weird, creepy stuff going on, and the forum posts are also not really written well, but the thing you need to remember is this is all real. Yes, from the start it was referred to as a creepypasta, and the writing of the posts is probably intentionally meant to be like a creepypasta, but that doesn't change the fact that this was all a genuine reaction to a weird Mario ROM hack. The ROM hack ends with Mario completing a castle as normal, but with text stating, "Victim number 1, eyeballs were unable to be found. The victim was found laying on her carpet. Causes of death unknown, hand marks with unidentified fingerprints were found all over the corpse." But that is actually not where the story ends, because there was a text file included in the files for the hack. But this was no ordinary text file. It was a JPEG merely converted into a text file. Converting it back into a JPEG leaves you with this. Again, the story does not end here, as there's a whole ARG that connects to this creepypasta, but I'm not going into that because other people have made better, more in-depth videos about it than what would be possible here. I don't really think it's fair to say whether Mario has aged well or not, seeing as it's real, but if we ignore that, then no, I suppose it hasn't, since it's incredibly cliche, but that also was likely the point. I highly doubt that the Mario ROM hack was made for any other reason than to just be a real-life creepypasta hack, and so, again, I don't think it's really fair to judge it in the same way as the other stories I've talked about. Before we move on, I want to talk about the image, which, much like the original Jeff the Killer image, was lost. Keyword was. On September 2nd, 2023, the original, unedited Victim Number 1 image was found. Now, the so-called Victim Number 1 image was not actually created for the Mario creepypasta, but instead for an old 4chan ARG that was just a promotion for a band. But yes, the origin of the photo has been found, which gives me hope that we can one day find other lost, unedited creepypasta photos, like Smile Dog and Jeff the Killer.
Lavender Town Syndrome.
Man, I'm dead.
Lavender Town Syndrome is pretty short, but I'm going to summarize it anyway for time's sake. Basically, the story goes that in the original Pokemon Red and Green, that being the Japanese version of Red and Blue, which is actually more of like an earlier version because Japan also has Pokemon Blue,
I don't care.
the Lavender Town song had a higher frequency that led children to kill themselves, or instead, they simply got sick. Supposedly, 200 children died because of Lavender Town, and so the song was changed in all future releases and generations of Pokemon. However, if you put the supposed original song in a spectrogram, you can see Unknown spelling out "Leave now," even though Unknown didn't exist until Generation 2. Ooh. That is the entire story. It ends there. Do I really need to say that Lavender Town Syndrome is bad? Do I have to say it? It's so glaringly obvious. Like, what more is there to say? Even as a kid, I thought this one was stupid, because literally within 5 seconds of searching, you can disprove it. Hell, as a kid, I remember I listened to the supposed original version of the Lavender Town song, and guess what happened? I got a headache, because that's what loud sounds do to people. It's not even a scary story in concept, it's just these kids killed themselves because a song too scary, oh, spooky. God, I love how shitty it is. Lavender Town Syndrome has not aged well at all, but it's so laughably bad that it loops back around to being a goddamn masterpiece.
Herobrine.
Minecraft used to be a very mysterious game. If you go back and play or watch videos of early versions of Minecraft, there's a strange sense of loneliness and mystery to it, in no small part due to the fog. Now, of course, this feeling of loneliness wasn't intentional, but the mystery most certainly was. I bring this up because Herobrine is very much tied to this version of Minecraft, the lonely, mysterious Minecraft, rather than the modern Minecraft we're all used to. The creepypasta itself is simple. The narrator makes a world in Minecraft and all is normal for a while, until the narrator notices something move in the fog. They initially think it's Cal, but in reality, it's another player, but with no name tag and no eyes. The mysterious player vanishes back into the fog, and soon the narrator starts noticing strange builds, such as trees with no leaves, pyramids of sand in the ocean, and 2x2 tunnels on the rocks. The narrator then leaves the game and takes to the Minecraft forums to ask if anyone else had encountered the mysterious entity. But every time they make a thread, it's deleted extremely quickly, and eventually they receive a message from a user named Herobrine, simply stating, "Stop." And when the narrator went to Herobrine's profile, the webpage 404'd. It's at this point that the creepypasta goes from being actually kinda good to being terrible. The narrator gets another message, this time from a different forum user, telling them that they should communicate over email, because the mods can read their messages. The emails detail the other user's encounter with the same entity, and months later, they discovered that Herobrine was a Swedish gamer, and in fact, the brother of Notch. The narrator then asked Notch if Herobrine was his brother, and Notch said yes, but he was no longer with us. The narrator had not encountered Herobrine since their first encounter, but they did get an image of him. Herobrine is by far not the worst creepypasta, and while it hasn't aged that well, it's no fault of the original story. Herobrine simply could not exist in modern Minecraft. And it doesn't help that the second half where it's revealed he's actually not just dead brother, he's a ghost in the game, ooh. It's stupid. That part is stupid. Herobrine is actually a good concept and works far better when he's just a mysterious entity with no real explanation, much like a cryptid. However, my experience with Herobrine is not with this actually kind of cool version, it's with the Minecraft content farm version where he's just there to be spooky to 4-year-olds and do whatever the hell this is. I mean, when the creepypasta was new, there were a few sightings and videos talking about him that were creepy to me, but not enough to outweigh all the other shit he was in. Which is why Giant Steve is a superior Minecraft creepypasta. Let's fucking go, Giant Steve mentioned. Let's go. Look, Giant Steve. Yeah, yeah. Lost episode creepypastas are often considered to be just as bad as gaming creepypastas. And I cannot say that I agree. Because lost episode creepypastas are worse! Take every single creepypasta cliche you can think of, and I guarantee even the best lost episode creepypastas will have them. Take Squidward Suicide, for example. I'm gonna be having to censor the name, so please bear with me. It's probably one of, if not the most well-known lost episode creepypasta, but it's still absolutely terrible. The story goes that the narrator was an intern at Nickelodeon in 2005 and got to see SpongeBob episodes early. And one day they watched an episode called Squidward Super Slide. That's a different word, YouTube, which was supposed to be the episode Fear of a Krabby Patty. I have no idea why an intern is getting access to early unfinished SpongeBob episodes, but that's probably the least outlandish thing in this story, so whatever. Now, the narrator thought nothing of this, as often the episodes would have joke titles such as this when they were in production, and continued watching. The episode seemed normal at first, with Squidward missing some notes on his clarinet, but eventually things start to seem off. Squidward plays his clarinet in front of a crowd, but frames of animation repeat despite the audio not repeating. The crowd begins to boo, but it's not the typical cartoon booing, it's hyper-realistic booing, full of malice. It cuts to a shot of the crowd's eyes, which are hyper-realistic, bloodshot eyes with red pupils. At this point, the narrator is confused, but keeps watching. The episode cuts to a shot of Squidward on his bed, looking upset with absolutely no audio. Squidward begins crying, and the camera zooms into his face, with his sobbing getting louder and louder. Eventually, it cuts for a split second to an image of a dead child for literally no reason other than shock value. And then it goes back to Squidward as he bleeds from his eyes, and guess what? Guess what the blood is? Did you guess hyper-realistic? Because it's hyper-realistic! Then it cuts back and forth between Squidward and more dead children, and eventually, a demonic voice says, "Do it!" And Squidward eats a shotgun, if you know what I mean. The episode ends with a shot of Squidward's, say it with me now, hyper-realistic corpse! But that's not when the story ends, because Steven Hillenburg gets involved, and he's mad. He wants to know where Squidward's self-game ended.
I'll game end him myself.
came from, but nobody can figure it out. It's like a ghost made it or something. See what I mean now? Last episode creepypastas are stupid. Squidward Seppuku literally spawned the hyper-realistic trope used in so many shitty creepypastas. Now, it is entirely possible that it was created as a troll, but I might be misremembering that since I can't find any evidence that it was. So, I'm gonna assume I made that up and it was written completely seriously. But yeah, this story has never really been possible to take seriously. I remember it being far scarier as a kid, but that was mostly due to the image attached to it, which I also can't take seriously anymore because of the Joe Mama memes. Squidward Sewer Slide is an embarrassment. These next two last episode creepypastas are not nearly as bad as it, but that doesn't mean they're remotely good.
Mouse.avi.
What is it with these last episode creepypastas having suicide in the title? I'm gonna be referring to this one as Mouse.avi from now on since I don't want to have to keep censoring myself. Mouse.avi is a lost Mickey Mouse cartoon from the 1930s, which contains nothing but Mickey walking past some buildings for 2 or 3 minutes while constant banging on a piano plays in the background, until it stops being constant and is replaced with white noise. That is the wording the creepypasta used, not me. Meanwhile, Michael Rat isn't as joyful as he usually is, but instead he looks sad, with his head tilted to the ground. According to the story, this is all the short was believed to be for many years, until the full thing was found. Instead of merely being 2 to 3 minutes, the full short lasts for 9 minutes and 4 seconds exactly, and from the 2 or 3 minute mark until the 6 minute mark, the short is nothing but a black screen. But at exactly the 6 minute mark, it cuts back to Mickey, but now there's gargles crying in the background, and the sidewalk Mickey is walking on starts distorting, and his face starts changing into a smirk. At 7 minutes, the crying turns to screams, Mickey's face gets even more distorted, and colors that, quote, should not have been possible at the time start appearing. The buildings turn to rubble and start floating mid-air, and the sidewalk gets even more distorted. At this point, the man who had been watching and transcribing the short left the room, and had someone else continuing the work for him. The screaming continues until 8 minutes in, before abruptly cutting to the Mickey Rat face typically used during the credits of these shorts, with the distorted music box playing in the background. What happens in these last 30 seconds of the short is unknown, but all that is known is that the man who had been sent to watch the last part of the film walked out of the room with pale skin, stating, "Real suffering is not known," 7 times, before shooting himself right then and there. Supposedly, the last frame of the short was Russian text saying, "The sights of hell bring its viewers back in." The story ends with the narrator warning the reader not to watch the short if they find it online. Okay, honestly, not really that bad. Mouse.avi isn't written all that badly, and it has much more of a cosmic horror feel to it, which is pretty unique. Let's check out our recreation of it. Maybe it'll be good. So, Mouse.avi, despite the fact that I just said it's not really that bad, is still bad, and the recreations of the video prove it. I'm sure there's some good ones out there. I did purposely choose the worst one I could find to show you, but the concept of the story is just fundamentally flawed at its core. Sure, it has some interesting ideas and isn't written all that terribly, but considering that the majority of the video recreations of Mouse.avi don't even get the details right, when they're this goddamn specific about it in the story itself, it's not really a good sign of the creepypasta's quality, is it? Now, I will fully admit that Mouse.avi was absolutely terrifying to me as a kid, but I cannot for the life of me figure out why. Like, maybe I saw one of the better recreations or something? But I've talked enough about Mouse.avi at this point for far longer than any reasonable person should be talking about it. Overall, it's really just not aged well, especially the videos recreating it.
Dead Bart.
It's hard to talk about Dead Bart because it's quite possibly the most cliché lost episode creepypasta out there. The story goes that Fox's bizarre numbering of Simpsons episodes is due to a lost episode known as Dead Bart, which was supposed to be in season 1. The episode was written entirely by Simpsons creator Matt Groening, and during production of season 1 he acted strange, forbidding anyone from even mentioning the Dead Bart episode. The narrator hears about this lost episode and wants to view it, and eventually asks Matt Groening himself for the episode at a convention. When he hears the narrator wants to see Dead Bart, he, quote, lost all color from his face and started trembling, and when the narrator asked for details, Matt Groening was on the verge of tears. He then grabs a piece of paper and writes something on it, begging the narrator to never mention the episode again. This story is already pretty bad, but don't worry, it gets worse. The piece of paper the narrator receives has a website link on it, so they go to the website, which is completely black aside from a single yellow download link. They click on it and immediately are hit with the worst computer virus they had ever seen, and unable to system restore, they rebooted the computer? What? That's not how computers work. What the fuck are you talking about? Thankfully, the narrator copied the file onto a CD, which I'm pretty sure would mean that the virus is now on the CD. The CD, of course, contains the Lost Simpsons episode, which starts as normal, but the characters in animation are slightly off. Homer is angrier, Marge is depressed, Lisa is anxious, and Bart has genuine anger and hatred for his parents. The episode's plot revolves around the Simpsons going on a plane trip, whatever that means, and Bart is fooling around on the plane and eventually breaks a window and gets sucked out of the plane. It was at this moment that Bart became Heisenberg. It was at this moment that Bart became Dead Bart. The episode cuts to a, you'll never guess, hyper-realistic picture of Bart's dead body, in case it wasn't obvious enough how bad this creepypasta is. Act 2 of the episode is just the Simpsons crying at their dinner table, but the crying slowly gets more realistic, maybe even hyper-realistic. And Act 3 begins 1 year later, with Marge, Homer, and Lisa now being skeletally thin, and I guess Maggie just doesn't exist in this episode. The Simpsons begin walking to Bart's grave, while the now abandoned Springfield gets more and more decrepit. And once they get to the grave, Bart's corpse is just sitting there for some reason. They all start crying again, but then stop and stare at his corpse. Homer says a joke as the camera zooms in on him, but it's inaudible. The camera then zooms out, and gravestones of every Simpsons guest, including ones that nobody knew of at the time and ones that hadn't been on the show yet, were all listed among the graves. The guests that had died between the episode's creation and the modern day all had accurate dates, and the episode ends with a hyper-realistic image of the Simpsons family on the couch. The narrator then realizes that you could predict when living Simpsons guests would die by looking at the death dates on their tombstones, but they realized that the date is exactly the same on each of them. I hope I've properly conveyed how bad Dead Bart is. I cannot believe this wasn't written as a joke. Not only are there I wrote the wrong there. That wasn't an intentional bit, I wrote the wrong there. Not only are there countless grammatical errors, and not only does the logistics of the narrator's PC make no sense, but what is the episode even implying? Does Matt Groening have psychic powers? Is he gonna blow up the Earth and kill everyone at the same time? How is everyone gonna die at the same time? You can't just say that and then not elaborate. I don't get it. I really don't get it. Even as a kid, I thought this one was kind of stupid. Sure, the image attached to it was kind of freaky to me, but guess what? That's not even from this creepypasta. That's just from a real Simpsons episode. It's not even Bart in the image, it's Homer. How is this a genuine attempt at horror? How is this not a joke? I assume the idea of it is supposed to be the whole Simpsons predicting the future taken to an extreme, but it doesn't work in the context of the story because there's zero build-up. Had that been established earlier, then okay, maybe Dead Bart would be slightly better, but it's so poorly written and overall lazily made that I doubt it. With all that being said though, Dead Bart is not the worst creepypasta of all time in my opinion. It's damn close, but there is something far, far worse. You should know what it is by now. That's right. I'm talking about the one, the only,
Sonic.EXE.
If you've seen any videos about the worst creepypasta, Sonic.EXE is one that comes up a lot. And for good reason, because this is quite possibly the worst creepypasta I've ever read. In the best way possible. This shit is hilarious. The story begins with the narrator Tom talking about how much he and everyone else on Earth loves Sonic. He describes that while playing Sonic Unleashed, he noticed that he had received a mail, but the only thing in the mailbox was a CD case, 4 computers, and a note. Tom takes the mail inside and reads the note. It is from his dear friend Kyle, who he hasn't heard from in 2 weeks. Tom notices that the handwriting, while definitely Kyle's, is slightly off, almost like he was writing it in a hurry. The note says, paraphrasing here, "I can't take it anymore. I had to get rid of this thing somehow before it was too late. I can't do it. You have to destroy the CD. He'll come after you too. He's too fast for me. Destroy the disc, you absolute buffoon. If you play it, he'll kill you too. Just destroy the disc. Please, God, destroy it. Now let's play a little game. If you guess this question right, you'll get a 1 penny at some point in your life. Now what does Tom do in this situation? Does he A, destroy the disc like his dear friend Kyle, who clearly wrote this note in a hurry and is also missing, asked? B, does he investigate what the disc is, find out if it's just a weird prank, and if not, destroy the disc like his dear friend Kyle asked? Or C, play the game like a fucking idiot because it says Sonic on it, even though he was explicitly told not to, like 5 times? If you guess C, you're correct, you get nothing, I lied about the penny. It is from this point onwards that Sonic.EXE goes from being pretty typically bad to the absolute worst creepypasta. Tom puts in the disc and all seems normal as the title screen is just the normal Sonic 1 title screen. Except for a split second where Sonic's eyes are black with red pupils with blood flowing out of them, and the ring behind him is rusted, and the ocean turned into blood, and instead of Sega 1991, it says Sega 666. Are you scared yet? You should be so scared right now. The game then cuts to black for 10 seconds before cutting to a final select screen from Sonic 3. Except it's more of a level select because the Knuckles and Eggman levels are locked, forcing Tom to choose Tails. Now what does Tom do at this point? Does he turn the game off and destroy the disc, realizing that maybe his missing friend Kyle was right and the game is cursed? No, he keeps playing as it's clearly just a hacked game. Tom selects Tails and the game freezes for 5 seconds before Kefka's laugh from Final Fantasy VI plays. When the game returns, it shows Hill Act 1, showing Tails in Green Hill Zone. The music is reversed, but aside from that, everything seems normal. Tom soon notices that the level is completely flat, and there's no enemies or items to be found. As he continues onwards, he notices that one of the animals that would ordinarily be rescued after defeating an enemy is dead on the ground in a pool of blood, and as he continues further and further, more dead animals appear. Eventually they stop appearing, and the music stops as well. And it's at this time that Sonic appears, with his eyes closed and back turned to Tails. Tails walks up to Sonic on his own as static plays and reaches his hand out to touch Sonic, and for a split second, Sonic's eyes open, revealing black eyes with red pupils, just like on the title screen. Oh! During all this, Tom feels immense dread, and you would think he would turn the game off and destroy the disc at this point, but nope, he keeps playing. The screen turns black again, and after 7 seconds, text appears saying, "Hello. Do you want to play with me?" Tom enters a new level called Hide and Seek, and honestly, I am getting really tired of this story, so I'm gonna start speeding this up. And chances are you already know how it goes anyway. The Hide and Seek level is just Angel Island Zone from Sonic 3, except everything is on fire, which is actually normal for that level. Tom makes Tails run as fast as he can, but Sonic eventually appears again with the Kefka laugh, and then the drowning music starts playing, and Sonic is chasing Tails. Sonic kills Tails, there's a loud scream, and text saying, "You're too slow, wanna try again?" Tom is brought back to the character select screen. Tails is now locked out and in the top TV screen on the file rather than the box where he'd normally be, and his fur is now black, and he's bleeding from his eyes like Sonic. At this point, I'm done questioning why he wouldn't just destroy the game already, because clearly this Tom guy is a complete idiot. Knuckles is selectable now, and the level is called You Can't Run. Again, the level is flat and there's no enemies or items. Eventually blood appears on the ground, and oh, look at Sonic, how you doing, buddy? Knuckles is trying to fight Sonic, but he can't hit him. Sonic kills Knuckles, Tom is sent to the select screen again, and guess what Knuckles looks like? Did you guess his fur is darker and he's bleeding from the eyes? Because he is! Now at this point, Tom actually does something slightly intelligent and turns the game off, but instead of destroying the disc like his dear missing friend Kyle asked, he takes a little nap. Tom has the most disturbing nightmare of his life, which is literally just Tails and Knuckles asking for help and telling Tom to stop before he gets killed too. Tom foolishly starts playing the game again and selects the final level, Eggman. Guess what happens here? Did you guess the level is flat with no enemies or items until blood appears on screen? Well, you guessed wrong, because this level has stairs. It isn't flat. Peak level design. I'm so glad we got stairs now. Sonic does the Kefka laugh again, and then kills Eggman, and then Tom is shown a, guess what, hyper-realistic image of Sonic with bloody eyes and teeth. This image lasts on screen for 30 seconds, and then the screen flickers with red static. The stupid-ass laugh happens again, and now the image says, "I am God." Tom realizes at this point that Sonic is some sort of demon who killed his friend Kyle, so now would be a great time to destroy the disc, but nope, he just lets the game keep doing its thing. Sonic lunges at the screen, a loud screech plays for 10 seconds, and then it cuts to black before saying, "Ready for round 2, Tom?" It cuts one final time to the main menu, and now Eggman's skin is gray and he's all bloody, who would have guessed? The computer turns itself off after 25 seconds, and Tom sits in silence for a while. Eventually, he hears a voice behind him saying, "Try to keep this interesting for me, Tom." Tom turns around and he screams because there's a Sonic plushie on his bed. But the Sonic plushie has bloody eyes. Oh shit! It's Sonic.EXE! Tom, get out of there! And that, my friends, was the story of Sonic.EXE. I am at a loss for words. I genuinely don't know what to say. It's just so peak. There are so many grammatical errors, and the story barely makes any sense because, as I keep saying, why would you not destroy the disc that your missing friend told you to destroy? Not to mention that Tom is presumably supposed to be an adult, and he's constantly acting like an absolute child. Like, you saw a Sonic plushie and you screamed? Hello? Just fucking kick him! Just kick the plushie away! I cannot believe a grown adult wrote this story. It is actually embarrassing. I called Squidward's suicide embarrassing, but at least there's a small chance it was either written by like 13-year-old or it was written as a joke. Sonic.exe was written completely seriously. It's not a joke. And that brings me to my history with Sonic.exe. I'll admit it. Sonic.exe scared me as a kid. It really scared me, probably the most out of all these creepypastas. Am I proud of that fact? God, no. But when I was around 8 years old, I watched a Let's Play of the Sonic.exe game, which, I will say, the game is ever so slightly better than the creepypasta, but it's still bad. And while I was scared pretty much the whole time because I was 8, nothing could have prepared me for the "I am God" image at the end. To this day, I still can't look at the image for an extended period of time, but that's more due to my history with the image rather than the quality of the image itself. I promise you, I'm not trying to make Sonic.exe sound worse than it is. I have not been trying to make any of these creepypastas sound better or worse than they are, but I especially am not trying to make Sonic.exe sound worse than it is. It is genuinely this bad. Jeff the Killer and Dead Bart, while also absolutely terrible, at least had some competence to them. Everything about Sonic.exe is incompetent. The main character is an incompetent idiot who doesn't do the one simple task asked of him. The game is basically just a walking sim. The actual writing the story is on par with something I would have wrote when I was 10. There's an over-reliance on shock value and hyper-realistic blood, and the concept is just not scary at all. Like, seriously, you want me to be scared of this? Oh, and don't get me started on all the spin-offs and remakes, and do not get me started on that goddamn Friday Night Funkin' mod. Why does this creepypasta refuse to die? Please, just let it die already. Let it die, let it die. Let it shrivel up and die. Sorry guys, I got a little heated there. Contrary to what this video has shown you, I do not care about creepypastas that much. I was playing all of that up for a joke, yet here I am having talked about them for an hour. I think it's about time I wrap this video up. So, what have we learned here today? Trick question, we learned nothing. Because I think we all already knew old creepypastas suck. But you know what? I think that's okay. If it weren't for all the terrible old creepypastas, we would have never gotten some of the actually good internet horror that's come out as of late. Take Cove, for example. Well, absolutely not that bad, especially for creepypasta standards. Without it, we likely would have never gotten Local 58. Hell, some people have made newer, better versions of these classic creepypastas. I know there's at least a couple analog horror series that are new, fresh takes on these stories, and while analog horror isn't really my thing, it is something that a lot of people enjoy, though there are some stories that I don't think any amount of editing or rewriting could save, like Sonic.exe. Now, before I leave, I'd like to quickly give my final thoughts on each creepypasta. After all, this video was about if they'd aged well or not, so it's only fitting to end the video with answering that question. So, in order of coverage, Jeff the Killer has not aged well, but Slender Man, at least the original story, has. The Rake 2 has not aged well, but that's more because of how boring it is. Smile Dog and the Russian Sleep Experiment haven't aged well either, for the same reason as Jeff the Killer. They are bad. Cove has aged well because of how popular analog horror is now, since it's a precursor to that genre. However, the story isn't that good. Mario 2 has aged well, but that's only because it's real. the story is kind of bad. Lavender Town Syndrome and Herobrine have not aged well for different reasons. Lavender Town because it's plain old bad, and Herobrine because Minecraft has changed too much for Herobrine to still work. And also Herobrine is a joke now. The last episode creepypastas are all poorly aged because they're just straight up bad, and Sonic.EXE has aged by far the worst out of all these creepypastas for reasons that I've already gone into at length. So, to answer the question, no, creepypastas have not aged well. That isn't to say there aren't any good ones. Slender Man and Men Drowned, I think, are the only two that I would say are legitimately good, but even then, there's better horror media out there. Though old creepypastas are a relic of the past, they will likely continue to influence horror for years to come, and who knows, maybe something good will come out of them one day. But I'll leave it at that for now. There's plenty of classics I didn't cover in this video, so who knows, maybe I'll make another one of these videos in the future. Thank you all for watching. Stay safe out there, and have a good one.